This is lesson 4, making the cut. So I've opened Premiere Pro, and I'd like to continue this project from the file I exported from Prelude in the previous video. So in the Premiere Pro dialog box, instead of creating a new project, I'm going to choose to open a recent item. I'll choose Open Project, and then I'll navigate to where I saved my project file, which for me was on the desktop. Desktop, Reporter, and here is Reporter at Crime Scene, PROJ. Now, if you watched the previous video, you saw me create this project as an export from Adobe Prelude, our ingesting program. So when I choose to open the project, everything that was in that project, everything I highlighted in the Prelude project panel, was exported here to Premiere Pro. So we have the Reporter at Crime Scene rough cut. We have the B-roll footage. We have the A-roll footage. Everything is here. And if you look in the B-roll folder, I click the list view, and then expand it, that bystander interview subclip I created is here as well. So Prelude is basically a streamlined interface for ingesting and prepping files and creating really quick assembly rough cuts. A rough cut is usually a really rough series of clips placed one after the other on your timeline so you can get an idea of how your footage is going to be edited together. They're usually very quick. They're often used just as a sample to show a producer or director the way that the footage has been assembled. You're not using, with a rough cut, you're not using any fancy editing tricks, you're not using any transitions. You're literally just taking the clips and trying to assemble a sequential story. Prelude isn't necessary for your workflow. It can be helpful if an editor and director and producer are working together, because it would allow people who don't know Premiere Pro to very quickly bring in footage and very quickly assemble footage that they can then hand off to a video editor, where it can be refined. A lot of directors and producers like Prelude's features because it's very streamlined and they don't have to learn every button or tool in Premiere Pro in order to make a very quick rough cut. So in some workflows, it can really streamline your process. If you're working by yourself, you very possibly will not use Prelude, because everything that you can do in Prelude for making subclips, making an assembly cut, making new sequences can all be done in Premiere Pro as well. It really is up to you to figure out how Prelude can fit into your workflow. But in this case, it makes a really quick work of bringing in footage, lining everything up, and organizing my panel. I don't have to worry about all the extra panels in Premiere Pro that can sometimes get in your way if all you want to do is organize the project panel and organize your content. I'm going to change a couple things about this. I'm going to shift the project panel into its list view, and I'm going to double click on Reporter Rough Cut. And I can see here that everything has
been discovered. The victim's name has...
And I can see here that everything that was in my project panel is here as well. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the timeline, and both clips are here. Now that I've made that rough cut, I can use Premiere Pro's features to quickly refine this edit. So there's a part of this clip at the beginning that I really don't want.
This has been discovered. The victim's name has not been released.
This clip doesn't really start very clearly. I'd like to actually start it with the victim's name has not been released. So I'm going to move my playhead around
the victim's name
until I find about the area where she starts saying it. Then I'm going to zoom in on the timeline. The plus sign on the keyboard, the numerical plus sign, allows you to zoom in your timeline very rapidly. And it allows you to see the waveform of the audio. This clip is composed of a video and an audio component. The audio is displayed as a waveform. A waveform shows you volume over time. And you can use that waveform to figure out where someone is speaking and where someone is pausing. Combined with the visual cues you see in the program monitor, you can use this to very rapidly edit your clips. Now, the waveform's a little small. So the timeline is divided into the section where your clips are stored and the track headers. Audio and video are stored on tracks. There's a video one, audio one track in this case, though you can have an infinite number of video tracks and audio tracks in any sequence. If I place my cursor at the bottom of the audio track header, I can actually enlarge it. and that makes the waveform larger and easier to see. If I zoom in even more, it makes the waveform even easier to see. So I can now move my playhead around, and then I can preview. I'm just pressing spacebar.
The victim's name has...
And I can see exactly where she starts saying the victims. So if I move my playhead to 1 second, 3 frames, and I can just type in 103 if you're not already there in the playhead position field. The program allows you to type into the playhead position field, and you don't need to actually use semicolons to separate the different areas. And I press return or enter. The playhead will jump to 1 second, 13 frames. The playhead position field uses timecode in order to tell you your location along the timeline. The beginning of the timeline is 4 sets of zeros. Any number after that is frames is the last number. Frames add up to make seconds. Seconds add up to make minutes. Minutes add up to make hours. Seconds, minutes, and hours are standard clock time. Frames, the number of frames that make 1 second, is based on the frame rate of your video. So that will change. If I'm not sure what the frame rate of this video is, in the project panel, I can always go to the project panel's panel menu, and I can show my preview area. I can then click on the A-roll footage, and when I highlight it, I can see that the reporter at crime scene is an MPEG file. It's a pretty common high-def file now. I can see its dimensions, and I can see its frame rate. This was recorded at 24 frames progressive in order to simulate film. 24 frames per second actually displays as 23.976. That's called drop frame timecode. It's a counting trick, but the actual playback, the actual speed is 24. If you're recording for American television standard, your frame rate would be 30, but it would display again as drop frame timecode as 29.97. Don't let this confuse you. It doesn't change the speed of the clip. It's simply a counting trick. Now, back to the timeline. So at 1 second, 3 frames, I'd like to have this clip start. That means everything before it I need to remove. Now, I can use my selection tool for that. And I've moved the playhead specifically to 1 second, 3 frames because I want to use it as the target where I want to trim my clip to. When you trim a clip, you simply reduce it, you shorten it. And you can trim from the beginning of a clip or the end of a clip. So I've placed my playhead at 1 second, 3 frames. And the playhead, whatever is underneath the playhead is what you're seeing in the program monitor. It's going to serve as a destination for where I want to trim my clip to. Now, what I'd like to do is make the clip shorter, and I'd also like to prevent any extra spaces from occurring. So I'm going to activate the Ripple Edit tool. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. The Ripple Edit tool allows, and I zoomed out by using the minus sign on the keyboard, by the way. The Ripple Edit tool allows me to trim a clip, and it also prevents spaces or gaps from forming on your timeline. I could use my selection tool to trim a clip. I simply click with the selection tool at the beginning of the clip, and I'm dragging it to the playhead. But that leaves me with this empty space, dead air, a gap in front of my clip. I'm going to undo that with Command-Z or Control-Z if you're using Windows. Now the Ripple Edit tool allows me to avoid that. The Ripple Edit tool, when I click at the beginning of a clip and drag towards my playhead, everything snaps to that playhead line. When I release my mouse, nothing seems to have happened. There's no gap, there's no space. There's a very subtle shift. Every clip on the right side of this Ripple Edit I just made shifted over by the duration of the edit. So if I move back to the beginning of my timeline, I just drag the playhead back to the beginning, and if I press spacebar to preview,
The victim's name has not been...
you'll notice that the clip now does not include that extra space at the beginning. It now starts with the victim's name. So the Ripple Edit tool allows you to trim clips on your timeline and automatically pull everything that was to the right of that clip over in order to prevent gaps from forming. Now this reporter at crime scene clip is actually 2 parts. I'm going to move towards the end of the clip.
This is Amy Redding.
And at approximately At approximately 8 seconds, 6 frames, she begins to sign off. So there's an introduction to the story, and there's a sign off, an outro in the same clip. And I'd like to separate the clips. To do that, I'm going to use a very simple command called sequence add edit. The keyboard shortcut on a Mac is Command K. On Windows would be Control K. What the add edit button command does when I click it is it cuts the clip at its current position. So wherever the playhead is, any clip beneath it gets cut, gets chopped. Now, all it's really doing is, again, subdividing the clips. Nothing here is destructive, so nothing here ever damages the clips on your hard drive at all. It's a really great feature of the application to be completely non-destructive so that you can play and experiment as much as you like. After the reporters sign off, there's an area that just isn't important. She's just talking to the cameraman. I'll slide down to about 12 seconds and I'll preview again.
New York.
So after she says New York, that's it. That's the end of the outro. The rest of this clip is unnecessary. Again, I'm going to use the ripple edit tool, and I can click either at on the video or the audio with the tool. I've got to make sure that the ripple edit, which is a yellow trident, is pointing towards the clip that I want to edit, because if I'm not careful, I could accidentally edit the clip to the right. So I gotta make sure it's pointing towards the clip I want to edit. And then I'm just going to click and drag towards the playhead, which is my destination for the cut. And now when I release, the bystander interview clip is pulled in. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So now what we have is a beginning of the reporter's intro to the story and the reporter's outro to the story right next to each other. Really what I want to do is have reporter intro, the interview, and then the outro. That's normally how things would go. So I need to move the clips. I'm going to take the selection tool. Selection tool is how you select and move things. And what I'd like to do is move the bystander interview clip in place of the reporter at crime scene. So I'm going to remove my playhead to the edit point between the two reporter at crime scene clips. The intro, which is the beginning, and the outro is the second one. Now if I drag the playhead, notice it doesn't snap to anything. If you press and hold the shift key on your keyboard when you're dragging the playhead, you'll force the playhead to snap to the edit lines. Remember, you're using a keyboard modifier now to change the behavior of the tool. You have to release your mouse first and then release the shift key on the keyboard, otherwise it'll stop snapping. Now I'm ready to move the bystander interview in between the two reporter at crime scene clips. But if I just click on it, it doesn't help me. If I just click and drag the clip over the second reporter at crime scene, what it actually does is removes the second reporter at crime scene clip. This is called an overwrite edit. It basically allows one clip to overwrite and remove another. What I want to do is basically move the bystander interview clip and push the second reporter at crime scene clip, the outro, to the end. To do that, it works the same way. I click on the clip and drag it, but I need to hold down the Command key, or on Windows, the Control key, when I drag it. Because what this does, so I drag it first, and I start pressing the Command or Control key, and these little teeth, these little icons appear at the beginning of my clip. They're little arrows pointing towards the clip. This changes the type of edit from an overwrite, which would delete the reporter at crime scene clip, to an insert, which pushes it. And again, I have to release my mouse, and then I release the Command or Control key if you're using Windows to complete the edit. So now I have three clips: the reporter intro, the bystander interview, and the reporter at crime scene. So I can very rapidly use my selection tool, the ripple edit tool, and my keyboard modifiers to assemble footage and move it around however I like. I now could trim that bystander interview clip again using the ripple edit tool, most likely, to make it more seamless in integration between the three clips. And this is what editing is. It's assembling your footage into the proper sequential position, and it's trimming and adjusting your clips to adjust the pacing, to adjust the timing, and to create a cohesive and organized story. So in this lesson, we've learned how to open a new project. Specifically in this case, we opened one that was exported from Prelude. We've learned how to edit clips on the timeline using the selection tool, the ripple edit tool. We've learned how to create both an overwrite, which will replace one clip with another, and an insert edit, which will allow you to push clips and extend the duration of the timeline. And we've learned a little bit about the idea of editing for continuity.